Got it. All right, we're live. So today we're talking about building bridges, not barriers, the art of leadership with boundaries. My name is Melissa. I'm an executive coach and a management consultant. And what I do is I work with leaders. And I help them build their influence, build up those people skills that allow them to be effective in their leadership. And one of the big questions that I'm always tackling is, how can I be empathetic? How can I, be that type of leader that I know that I am and hold the values that are important to me and yet still hold boundaries, because we can't just, give everyone what they want. It's just not possible when we're within the business context. And so I work with these leaders to help them figure out how they're going to be exactly who they are. So keep their leadership style, keep their values, and learn how to practice that empathy in a very productive, effective way with boundaries. So I'm going to share some of those secrets with you today. Super exciting. One of my favorite topics, and a topic that I'm always tackling behind the scenes. Kelsey Ann is joining me today. She's part of my team, and she has experienced what this is, we live this. We continue to be empathetic towards each other, and yet we hold boundaries. So Kelsey Ann, tell us a little bit about you, what you're doing here, and maybe some first thoughts on empathy and boundaries.
Sure. So, like you said, I'm Kelsey Ann, and I'm your managing director. Marketing director. And I come on these lives to offer the employee perspective, and really hopefully demonstrate how we live and breathe these concepts and these insights and these ideas that you talk about. It's something that I hadn't experienced before, having worked in corporate previously. And it's really refreshing. So when it comes to boundaries, I think people get very, like, boundaries make you kind of just like cringe, and they don't necessarily feel good. And then you think, okay, well, boundaries should feel good, and are they for me? Are they for them? There's a lot of unsettled. It's kind of muddy, I guess. These waters of what are boundaries, and how do we put them into play without offending, and having it feel good.
Yeah. And this is the thing, is like, by the time our brain gets to the oh, I think I need a boundary here, we're already in it. Whatever messy situation is already happening. And all of a sudden we have this feeling of oh, people aren't respecting my boundaries, or this isn't going well. There needs to be a boundary. And now we have to regain ground. We need to have some difficult conversations that we don't know how to have. We're not feeling sure about ourselves. We're also worried about, as a leader, if I give you a boundary, how are you going to react to that? And what does that mean for me? And what does that mean for the business? So there's a lot of question marks, and it's not easy. It's not comfortable. So today we're going to kind of flip it a little bit. We're going to learn about boundaries. We're going to learn about how to set them up in a way that it's going to feel good when you need to reinforce them. But we're going to start working on these boundaries now, before the mess, before things get crazy, before emotions come into play. So you're going to start thinking about these boundaries right now as things are good and stable. And the first thing that I want to tackle is boundaries versus rules. When I learned this, I went, oh, boundaries versus rules. So when we talk about rules are things that we set that tells people what they're supposed to do or not do, and what consequences might be attached to things. All right. So this is a very like external control. This is about you, you know, I'm using my fingers here, like it's pointing outwards, right? It's about others. And boundaries are more about ourselves than others. Boundaries is about what's okay and not okay for me. And it's very unique to every single person. So I'm going to open this up, Kelsey, and what are some of the first thoughts that are coming to mind as you're hearing this?
Automatically, it's like, okay, well, if boundaries are the person's, how do you know what their boundaries are if they don't communicate that to you?
Communication, very important. Yes, absolutely.
And my second thought is, if you've crossed those boundaries unknowingly, how do you backstep? So those were kind of two thoughts that kind of bubbled up.
We're definitely going to cover those things. So, rules are about here's how we're going to roll, and boundaries are about here's how I roll and how I'm respecting myself.
Mm-hmm.
So this is about you. And if this is about you, first and foremost, we need to know what these boundaries are. We need to have some clarity. I want to say hi to Joanne here, who is listening in. Joanne, you're going to love this one. Take out your pen and paper. Anyone else who's joining us, say hi. Let us know you're here. Drop your aha moments, your insights here as we're going along, or your questions. I'd be happy to answer them. So if boundaries are about us, 3 questions to ponder on are, what are my boundaries? What am I okay with and not okay with? In what circumstances can I do things? Second, how have I been communicating my boundaries? If it's all individual, and so far we're not mind readers as a society, it's not a skill that we've developed yet. So if people can't read your mind, how are you communicating these boundaries? What have you been doing? How clearly have you been communicating them? And then third question is, how do you respect your boundaries? How do you respect your boundaries? And there's a lot of layers to this question. What's coming up for you, Kelsey? And I can see the wheels turning. How do you respect your boundaries?
I guess for me, what comes up is like, depends on the person.
Depends on the person.
Right. My children, boundaries get a little muddier at times versus, other individuals in my life. So it, as I encounter, somebody at the gas station, that they're going to have a very different boundary, and it's very, very clear. And I guess I'm not really conscious of these boundaries that I'm setting with these people as I'm encountering them throughout my day, but I do. So yeah, there's
So that's
a lot of, yeah.
What I just heard is sometimes it's easy to respect my boundaries, and sometimes it's harder to respect my boundaries. And what's kind of funny is we think my boundaries aren't being respected, right? It's like a focus outward. But if you start thinking about boundaries inward, it's how are you respecting your boundary? It's not about them encroaching on your boundaries. How are you respecting that space and that boundary for yourself? And how are you communicating it so that people know? And when they cross it, how do you respect your boundary? It's up to you to respect the boundary. And by respecting your boundary, you're teaching others and you're modeling for others. Just going to give it a nice pause here just for you to sink that in. All right, so sharing boundaries. I think we've come to this place of sharing your boundaries are really important. People don't know. They can't read your mind. And if everyone's boundaries are different, and if they've been doing something, if they've been dancing with you, right? This is like every relationship, every interaction is like a dance, and you haven't said anything. And they've been doing the dance in a certain way for a very long time. As far as they know, they're respecting your boundary. You haven't said anything. There's no indication otherwise. Ideally, we're communicating these boundaries before we start the dance or as we're starting the dance. So it's easier. It's easier to set and nurture and maintain a boundary than have no boundary and then, you know, let people. So imagine your front door being the boundary. Okay, so are you leaving the front door open? Are you keeping it closed or are you keeping it locked? And if you have a closed door, you say, okay, this is my boundary, and you close your door, then people will knock. And I'll say, hey, can I come in? Some people might still barge in if it's not locked, like the reality. And then you can say, hey, I prefer to, I'm happy to let you in, but I prefer that people knock. That is. And when people barge in, that's not okay with me. Mm-hmm. Now, if you leave the door open, I haven't communicated a boundary. That means your door is open for people to come in your house and look through your stuff and possibly steal from you. You left the door open. It's harder to get them out, especially if they've been doing it for a long time. So what is that door for you? Where's that line? Aha, new analogy. You hadn't heard that one before. I'm full of analogies today. So how can we establish that door? How can we tell someone, hey, you know, this is where I'm comfortable? I do it all the time in every conversation, in every coaching session, when we start a conversation, Kelsey Ann and I, when we start a meeting, when I'm meeting somebody new, any kind of interaction, I'm setting a boundary. And I'm saying things like, this is my role. Hey, I'm Melissa. In this conversation, I'm going to be X, right? I'm an executive coach. I started this live. I'm an executive coach. I'm telling you about my role here. But with Kelsey Ann, I might say, hey, I'm calling you as your boss, or maybe I'm saying I'm calling you, you know, business aside, I'm calling as a friend right now.
And you do that often, both of them.
Right. Yeah. So I'm being clear from interaction to interaction. What is my role in this interaction? And then what's the very, very, very next thing I communicate is my intention. So my intention here is to check in on you and see how you're making out today. Or I'm calling because I've been super worried about X project and I'm really needing some information right now to feel okay with this. And this all sounds familiar, right, Kelsey Ann? This is the reality that we live in.
Yeah.
And then I will say things like what I will do for someone. So in my role, I'm here to help you do X, or I will do this and I will do that, but I won't do X and Y. So as a coach, I will be a guide. I will ask you questions. I'm going to help you. I'm going to guide you in a creative process to think outside of your current thinking so that we can create something new together. I'm going to be your partner. I won't do the work for you. I won't make decisions for you. I will champion you and what you want. This is about you, not about me. Right? If you've worked with me, Joanne, this is familiar. And then I will share things like what I will ask of the person and not ask of the person. So I'm asking you to be honest and as open as you can be. I'm not going to ask you to reveal anything that you're not comfortable with. But I'm hoping that what you can share with me, you can be honest in that sharing. So this is what I will ask of you and what I won't ask of you. I'll ask that you take responsibility for this, but I won't ask you to do it by yourself. And then I share relevant business context that we need to consider in whatever interaction we're having. So I might share if maybe it's this conversation where I call Kelsey in, I say, hey, I'm calling as your boss who's freaking out right now. I'm really concerned about X. And the reason I'm concerned is because business information. Now, Kelsey Ann, can you think, and you may not be aware of this, but can you think of times where I've invited you to share your boundaries?
What comes to mind is when we do our workshop or when I attend sessions with the Executive Edge, you will often have me introduce myself and let everyone on the call know what my role is.
Yeah.
And what I'm there to do, right? So I guess that's an example there. I don't know, between you and I, when we have our conversations right off the bat, how, I mean, I'm going to think about it now and be like, oh, that's right. And I know you're going to tell me that's how she does it.
And it's very subtle.
Yeah.
Very subtle. This is not like, hey, stop the presses. We're going to talk about boundaries. This is, Kelsey Ann, how are you comfortable with this? How do you want to go about this? Who do you want to be in this situation? Who do you want to be in this project? How do you feel about that? What do you need for you to be able to do the thing that you're about to do? What's the environment that you need? Okay, so if you're struggling with X, what are the things that you need? What are the boundaries? What is the space that you need? And sometimes I'll say, like, I'll get out of your way. Tell me how to get out of your way. In what way? When do I get in the way? Is that jogging your memory? Yeah. And these are just questions like that I'm asking every time we have interactions, whatever we're talking about. I'm sharing my boundaries, but I'm also I get curious about hers. And this is the thing, it doesn't have to be a one direction, like, hey, let me tell you about my boundaries, you better respect them. This is let's have a co-creative space here to talk about boundaries and to figure out how we're going to work together in a way that feels good and respectful. when I'm thinking about Voxer, maybe that's the way, when you have like people like barging into your office without knocking, like that would happen in an in-person environment. We work remotely. We have 100% remote. And so what barging into the office for us looks like probably Voxer messages. And so we've set up some boundaries around Voxer messages that when I send you a message, my intention is not to disrupt you. You pick up the message when you're available. And if I send you a message outside of business hours, because business owner, let's recognize the fact that business owners think about their business all the time, and they will lead messages at all hours and anytime. So my expectations is that doesn't disrupt your personal time, that you do not pay attention to Voxer, that sits there till the next morning. So that's another way that we've been setting boundaries. That's another example. And then you said, it's okay, I like to listen to them during my, then I'm ready. And I say, well, that is taking away some brain space when this is your personal time. So think about that. So I'm prompting you to think about that boundary.
Which I'm now more respectful.
You're the only one that can respect that boundary, right? I'm going to be leaving messages, but you're the one that's choosing where is my boundary here and when am I okay to pick up Voxer and listen to the voice note. All right. What are we learning about boundaries so far? If you're here on the call, Joanne, what have you learned so far that's resonating for you before we move to the next piece?
She said her pen is ready, so I think she's writing notes.
Kelsey-Ann, what's the gem here for you so far?
I think, and I mean, I know this, it's not information that I don't know, but that it's up to me to hold my boundaries, right? That nobody else can do that for me. Me opening up that app and looking at it, or, I heard you when you said that, and I'm trying not to do it, but it's one of those things. It's like the little unread, when you have like a voicemail message, that little one, you want it to go away.
All that is
emails. I have lots of emails, but the little voicemail, go away.
It's information. That notification is just information. What you do with that information is up to you. And I've said, like, hey, I'm not going to barge in. I'm going to leave it here in the mailbox, but I'm not barging in.
I think too, this conversation is really hitting home with some boundaries that I have to keep in my personal life with my children. That's kind of where it's really hitting. But it makes me also really reflect on how different we work now, or like that we work versus when I was working in other companies and the larger corporations where, to communicate your boundaries, you didn't really do that because you'd get canned. Like, there was somebody else waiting for your spot kind of thing. So there's felt that way.
There's a fear about communicating boundaries that's leading to this feeling of my boundaries aren't being respected. People are stepping over and barging in and not respecting me.
And thinking about rules as external, right? And boundaries as internal. The rules are never going to support your boundaries. So if you're waiting for the rules to be in play and for somebody to respect the rules and then your boundaries are respected, I'm realizing never happened.
Exactly. And stating that boundary, that fear of like, if I speak my boundary, it's going to get me in trouble. It might get me fired. Somebody might, take my place. when you start looking at communicating your boundaries before everything goes down, right? And communicating your boundaries avoids a lot of the messy stuff going down. You can do it in a very subtle way.
So for somebody sitting there thinking, okay, well, how do I communicate my boundary in a subtle way? But that is to the point when, let's say, they're being overworked, right? That, there's things that are going on their desk that should be on somebody else's desk, but they keep on doing it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I am feeling, so you'd have to go to the appropriate person at this point, depending on the structure, and you might have to communicate it to many people, even because this is a boundary. You've said, I'm okay with this by accepting it. And so everyone thinks you're okay with it. Can you still hear me?
Yeah. So everyone thinks that you're okay with it. We heard you, but now we've lost you again.
Can you still?
There you
Okay, I'm
are.
back. All right. Perfect. So everyone thinks you're okay with this because you haven't said otherwise. You haven't communicated anything to the contrary, and you've been, by doing this act of taking it, you're not respecting your boundary, and they're following your lead. So what communicating your boundary might be, I have come to realize that what I can handle in the run of a day is X. And in order to do my job really well, which I know is important to you, I need more time with Y. So as I'm looking at things right now, I can, if X and Y are the priority, this is what I can do in the next 48 hours, but it means everything else will need to wait. What are you okay with? So now I'm asking about your boundaries.
And inviting that conversation to happen about them. Right.
I didn't accuse you. I didn't say you're making me feel. I didn't say I'm outraged. You're not respecting me. I'm just saying, hey, this is information about me and my way of working. This is what I can do, and this is what I'm ready to commit to. And then you might say, well, you know what? If that's the case, I'd rather you take care of A, B, and C first. And X and Y, I think we can get an extension for a week. Okay. When I'm looking at A, B, and C, I actually think I can do that in about a day and a half. I think by tomorrow at noon, I can have those done. So now what do you think about that situation and your ability to share your boundaries?
So yeah, I just saw a note here from Jason. Powerful. It's such a hard balance. Didn't even think it was possible at work.
Yes. So possible. But it really starts with you respecting your boundaries. It's about you. And then if I'm, clearly stating those things, then they also have a choice to follow my lead, or at that point, they can choose to be disrespectful. And that may sometimes happen, but at least you have done the work in holding and respecting your own boundaries. And you can say, okay, I hear you're really upset. This doesn't feel okay for me right now. So I'd like to take some space and we can return to this conversation tomorrow when we can have a productive conversation about this. So now I'm also stating boundary. I'm willing to talk about this when we can have a productive discussion.
So something like that would be more appropriate when emotions are very heightened and you both need some time and some space to.
Yeah. Doable?
Doable. I think so.
It's doable. It's doable when we can do it, and it doesn't feel bad. It doesn't feel, it's not aggressing another person. Like, it's not
Yeah.
just asserting yourself. It's taking ownership of yourself.
And it's funny because we have this again with the analogies, like, oh, I need to, I need to have boundaries. I need to put up these walls to protect myself. Right.
Mhm.
And then, the way that you explain boundaries, those aren't walls. They
No.
really aren't, like it, but you're still being protected by them. So it's kind of this juxtaposition in my head of thinking about boundaries not like walls anymore.
Yeah. They're really like, let's build a bridge. Let's build a way that we can work together successfully, that we're both respected, that we're both empowered, that we can both take ownership for ourselves. Absolutely. So comes in empathy. Let's talk about empathy. Empathy is our ability to understand, to lean into another person and really understand how another person is thinking, feeling, wanting, needing, what is behind their behavior. This is not about condoning behavior. This is not about agreeing with their experience. This is about understanding. So I can understand somebody's experience without going through it myself, or even if I would have a totally different experience. So we talked about the fire last week. So let's bring in that little fire emoji, right? When I use the fire emoji, for me, it's like, yeah, motivation. Let's, like, it's important. It's hot. So when I use that, this is my internal experience. But when Kelsey Ann sees the fire emojis in my content, she goes, and so we're having totally different experiences looking at this thing. And I don't experience what she's experiencing, but I can understand why she's experiencing it. I understand the thinking. I understand the emotion. I understand the perceptions, what she values, what this represents to her. I can understand that, even if I'm not having the same experience. And often we think about empathy as, well, if they tell me, if I'm asking questions and they tell me and it's not realistic, I have to do something about it. Or if they're sharing some heavy stuff, like all of a sudden I'm bogged down.
I'm their therapist.
I'm their therapist. I shouldn't have to be their therapist. Like, all of these thoughts come up, and it's okay that you're having these thoughts. Okay, it's totally normal. I talk to lots of people. I do coaching every day. When we come to empathy, there's a lot of thoughts that come up, and internal tensions and fears and biases that come up with empathy. Totally normal. But it stems from this belief that empathy is about helping and about saving. So I'm empathetic because I help other people. And I would call that something different. Empathy is really just about understanding. And so one of the things that's that I see, I measure, I do EQ leadership profiles. And one of the skills that we look at, one of the competencies, is increase empathy. And there's like two patterns that I notice. It's either way high, and the person tells me it comes naturally, I'm so empathetic, but I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, and it is hard. It is weighing me down, and I'm really struggling. Or it's not the opposite. It's, I have a high capacity for empathy, and it's so hard to carry the weight and to be effective. Like it really is an impediment for me being effective and doing the things that I need to do and making those hard decisions, that I've chosen to tune it down. So I'm seeing it down on the scale, maybe at emerging, but it's not because they don't have the capacity for it. It's they've had to kind of shut it off to cope with the stress of the job and they're being effective at their responsibilities. And these two things are happening because of this misunderstanding. You can be empathetic and not carry anything on your shoulders. And what's the difference? The difference maker here are your boundaries. And respecting your boundaries. This is not about the other person putting something on you. This is about you seeing, I'm listening to them and I'm understanding them, and I will not put this on myself because it's not my responsibility. I'm going to offer you another perspective on the same thing. So imagine they have their own person and boundaries as well. And imagine that we're, in life, driving our cars, behaving, going towards things, doing our stuff. And this person comes to you and says, I really need a listening ear. There's a struggle. There is something that I need to talk about. And you listen, you say, oh, I know how to fix this. I'm a good problem fixer, problem solver. That's, my skill. So I'll just go fix that problem for you, which means you're taking them out of the driver's seat. You're getting in the driver's seat. Your hands are on the steering wheel. You're either putting them in the passenger, in the back seat, or the trunk, depending on who you are, right? And your pattern. And we'll drive for them. And then we'll say, see, destination arrived. You're all set. You can feel good about yourself because you've done the saving. You're the superhero right now. But what happened to their boundaries?
They were crossed.
Why?
Because you're driving their car.
Mm-hmm. And what
you're making you're taking their control away, and you're making decisions for them that they are supposed to be choosing and making decisions upon.
Yeah. So you're not only disrespecting your own boundaries and driving other people's cars, you're also taking them out. You're impeding on their need for power, need for freedom, ability to take ownership for themselves. We're stealing. We're disempowering. And as you're doing that, as you're driving other people's cars, who's driving your car?
Nobody.
Did you leave the front door open?
I'm like, okay, did I leave it on? Like, are my keys in so that, is my car going to shut down? Is it going to crash? What's it going to do?
Yeah. And we feel that. That's like, this is the weight of the world, and we can't tend to ourselves for driving other people's cars.
I love that analogy because it really, you can only drive one car at once. I know, like, there's technology coming into play, but like, really, you can only drive one car at one time. And having that analogy really, now I try not to solution for my kids, right? Mm-hmm. I try to get them to solution for themselves because I want them to be driving their cars at a young age.
Yeah.
Not my car, but their car.
Exactly. So what I'll do in a conversation where I'm practicing empathy, and I try to practice empathy pretty much in every interaction. Yeah. But I picture myself getting in the passenger. If I'm there to listen, if I'm there like true empathy, true listening, true understanding in this moment, that means I'm going to not do anything, which means I'm not driving anywhere, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going to sit in the passenger. I'm just going to ask you, I love to listen to this. I'd love to understand. Would you be willing to have this conversation? And I'm asking for permission to get into the passenger.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to have the conversation. I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to understand. I'm going to ask them questions that may prompt them to think and create solutions for themselves and help them think about what they want and how they're
Mhm.
going to go about it and what options are available. They're going to keep their hands on the steering wheel. They're
Mhm.
going to have their foot. They're going to decide when they're ready to press go.
Yeah.
When they're ready to press the gas. I'm merely there as an assist.
Mhm.
And then once they've arrived and they're ready, I'm going to get out of the passenger seat. I'm going to jump back in my car and I'm going to drive where I need to go. I'm not bringing any baggage because it's not mine. And that is the analogy that saves me, because I have hard conversations every day and I care about every single person that I talk to. And I listen and I go digging and we get to the real raw stuff.
Mhm.
The things that people share with me, it's heavy.
Mhm.
And yet I can't carry that. And it's not mine to carry. And I will not disempower them. But I will empower them by listening and understanding. And then you have information. Now you're building a bridge. You're building that connection with another person. And they can feel good about themselves in your presence because you're empowering them.
Mhm.
I'm going to stop here. What did you hear that was important to you? I'm giving a lot of information today, so I'm wanting to make sure I'm making like little pauses so we can absorb the pieces.
Yeah, no, there has definitely been lots of gems in this for sure to kind of simmer upon.
Absolutely. So think like a scientist, gather information. Empathy is about empowering you with information that is going to be useful in your decision making. So if, Jane tells you that she feels like the workload is unfair, you can use that information in your decision making. When you're setting up a project, you're going to be thinking, okay, how do we make this fair? It's going to give you the information you need to involve people in your decision making and their feelings. Boundaries aren't walls, they're bridges. They help us be more effective and create a space where people can be well and we can do great work together. So if I'm going to do just a quick highlight and then I need to run because I have someone in the weight room. Boundaries are about yourself. Take ownership. Know what they are. So do the internal work to figure out what they are, what you're okay with, what you're not okay with, how you're going to communicate these things, taking ownership, and how you're going to respect your own boundaries. Third, you're going to share it with people in a way that they can understand and make it a co-created conversation so they can also share about their boundaries. 3, be empathetic. It is a skill that will make the difference. It really makes the difference between those leaders that will be super effective and well liked and respected. And hold your boundaries as you're being empathetic. It will make the difference between unhealthy and healthy empathy, unproductive and productive empathy. And remember that boundaries are about building bridges, not walls. And that's it for today. Thank you all for joining. Leave me your gem, leave me your takeaway. I want to know, because I'm really passionate about this. I want to know what you heard today that was important to you. And I will see you all next week. Have a great day. Have a great week. Bye.